But I started reading up on ketogenic diets, the workaholic, Finney, Taubes, Lustig. When you start going down the rabbit holes that is out there, and then you start just really diving into the science, it made sense. What is causing the problem? And so I drew up a list of 100 different manufacturers across the globe. I cross-matched that to the federal regulations, and I called and I dialed, and I got so many doors shut in my face. But eventually, I was able to bring a product to market, and we lowered the cost of ketone testing by over 75%. It was a revolution for the ketogenic community. They've never had affordable testing to create outcomes.
Dorian, welcome to the Keto Camp podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ben. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. I love what you're doing. Big fan of the company. I've been using your machine for several years, and you guys do it the right way. And we'll talk about what that exactly means. But before we do, you have an amazing story, kind of a pain to purpose to promise story of why you decided to do what you're doing today. So how did you get involved in the health space, Dorian?
Yeah, great question. Go back to 2015, I was in the wine industry, living large in the Napa Valley, eating great food and drinking great wines, and all that great stuff, well, we thought it was great stuff, started to have a pretty massive toll on me and my body. And my weight had ballooned way over 200 pounds. I was on antidepressants. My job was going terribly, and I bounced between a couple of things, and something was wrong. And a good friend of mine said, "You know what, Dorian, you got to give up the white devils. You've got to get away from the carbs." And I'm like, I don't do fat diets. I do not do fat diets. I've seen my wonderful wife for 25 years go through so many dumb diets, from the cabbage soup diet to this other stuff, and it's this constant yo-yo and this battle. But I started reading up on ketogenic diets, the workaholic, Finney, Taubes, Lustig. When you start going down the rabbit holes that is out there, and then you start just really diving into the science, it made sense. So I went on a well-regulated ketogenic diet, and I was testing with an Abbott meter. And back in 2015, the test strips like $4 or $5. It was super expensive way.
Yeah.
But I was dialing it into my bio-individuality. And literally over a period of 3 months, my weight dropped off. I came off of all antidepressants. I got this joie de vivre. I felt like I was 24 and could take on the world. And one day, and I'm looking at the strip of a competitor's meter, and I'm like, why is this thing so expensive? There shouldn't be $4 or $5 a strip. When you look at the sum of its total parts, why is that? What is causing the problem? And so I drew up a list of 100 different manufacturers across the globe. I cross-matched that to the federal regulations, and I called and I dialed, and I got so many doors shut in my face. But eventually, I was able to bring a product to market, and we lowered the cost of ketone testing by over 75%. And the first iteration of our meter, we came out at $1 a strip for ketone testing, which was, it was a revolution for the ketogenic community. They'd never had affordable testing to create outcomes. And, I just didn't remember the conversation with Gemma going and say, "Hey, Gems, I got this idea. We're both in the wine industry, remember? And I think what we're going to do is we're going to convince people to prick their fingers like I've been doing, and we could be a great business. And I need to borrow some of the home equity line of credit." And she goes, "Well, how much do you need?" And I go, "Well, probably all of it." And it became all of it, and then some. We lost our house in the fires of 2017. And
Wow.
Again, I went to Gems and I said, "Hey, Gems, do you mind if we use the insurance money from the house?" And she says, "Yes." And then I came back to her a third time and said, "Do you mind if we use our possession money to continue?" Because we had to fund the whole of America's supply. So we're privately funded. We have no VC money that comes on in. It is us and a small team here in the Napa Valley that are dedicated to lowering the cost, giving tools and information for free if you go to our website, so that we can affect outside changes. And we also have our own foundation now, 501c3 nonprofit, where we fund clinical trials and studies into the efficacy and use of ketogenic therapy. So it is all about how can we affect change, and knowledge is power.
What a cool story. And thank you for lowering the cost of the ketones. I remember because I got into keto back in 2013, 2014. And at that time, it was like $6 or $7 a strip. So if you messed up with the strip, there goes $6, $7. If you messed up again, there goes $6, $7, and it added up.
Yeah, and at that stage, people were hunting on the back streets of Amazon
for
product that had been bought in Australia and then resold in America for a markup on it because the Australians subsidized ketone testing. I don't know why they don't do it here in the United States. And so there was this arbitrage thing going on, and people, you never had understood the provenance. I mean, we temperature control, we buy a container of product, and we temperature control it all the way from our manufacturer all the way into the United States, so that, it is in perfect condition when it gets into our warehouse, which has temperature control. And it's only after that moment when it leaves us, we're posting it out, does it go through? But usually it's sort of a few days, and that's not a problem. So we make sure that we've got the freshest of product, and it's all been kept for it the most bit. Whereas some of these fly-by-night people, you had no idea what they were doing.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So, the question that somebody's probably wondering right now, and I talk a lot about ketone testing, glucose testing, the differences between all three types of ketones, which we'll get to, but why would somebody want to test ketones? Why would they want to even have that data, Dorian?
Good question. Measurement is the first step that leads to control. Once you can control something, you can improve upon it. And so this is the first piece that comes on into play. And, there are different types of tests between blood, breath, and urine. And obviously I'm biased, but blood is the gold standard, and we can come back to those things. But you have to first think of the bio-individuality of that. And then you also got to come back as to the why. Why is this person choosing to go on a well-regulated ketogenic diet? Is it for simple weight loss? Is it for a psychology reason? Is it neurological for Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis? Is it a woman who might want to conceive because she's got polycystic ovarian syndrome? Is it for epilepsy or reversing type 2 diabetes? Now, there are different types of ketogenic diets. There's a different approach that you can use for different ways. This one size fit all, the 20-gram carb rule, each person will have a different reaction to foods in different ways. And so once you learn yourself and your why, then it becomes a lot easier. So the first way is simply, are you in ketosis or are you not? Does the depth of ketosis matter? Maybe not. Let's just say that's number one. And so that's usually for the person just starting. It's like, are the food choices I'm currently making enabling me to get into nutritional ketosis? And so you see 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, suddenly 0.5, you're in nutritional ketosis, and you get this gamification and feedback that the dietary choices you are making are working, because the blood doesn't lie. One could say, well, there is no test for being a vegan. There is no test for the cabbage soup diet, but there is a test for being in a state of nutritional ketosis. And so that's kind of like game number one. And sort of like game number two that you can do with testing is find out what foods are either giving you a high glycemic response. That is your glucose going up too high? I'm normally in the 80s, 90s in the morning, and I measure about an hour after waking, because there's a dawn effect. When you wake up in the morning, you get a cortisol spike. Cortisol will increase your blood glucose. You've got to kind of let that blow off a bit. That takes about an hour on some people. Sometimes it's longer on others.
Yeah.
But once that kind of like blown off, that gives you kind of like the stable fasted in the morning. So that's my normal baseline of what I like to do. And then say, for instance, I'm trying out a new breakfast. I've got my baseline, I eat something, and then about an hour after, I do that another measurement there. And then that's telling me from that, I'm like, did I get a big glucose spike? If I'm within 20 or 30 milligrams per deciliter, that's okay for me. That's my style. I'm not being super strict with myself, but that's where I am because I've been doing this since 2015. So if it's under that, I say this is an okay thing. Do I now need to test that food or thing again? No. So you test a lot to begin with, and the needs to test starts to diminish. Now, what could also happen is, say, for instance, I'm trying something new and I didn't get a glycemic response. So it stayed stable. But then I found that after a period of time, my ketones came down. I would ask myself, why did the ketone production come down? Did I perhaps have an insulin response that triggered for my liver not to come down? And what I found with me is sugar alcohols gave me a sympathetic insulin response.
Interesting.
So, when we talk sugar alcohols, sorbitol, mannitol, xylitol, erythritol, for me, all of those tolls took their toll on myself.
So it gave you a cortisol response to insulin followed, and then it dropped your ketones.
Exactly, to me. So, people look at keto foods, and I'm always careful about what is keto. I'm not the keto police in any way, shape, or form. I'm like, well, let the data drive you. Let the data drive you. What could work for, say, like Luis Villanor of Keto Games is going to be very different to what works for me or to Jane Doe at home. And, so that's why I don't like the one size fits all, because we kind of like think of, you think about if you're going into new territory, if you're going into a new place, you need a map and a compass, don't you? Well, the map is the roadmap of the foods that you're going to try, whether or not you're going to go into the wonderful country of India, if you will, and try Indian cuisine, or we're going to try Italian cuisine. That's your roadmap. And we're your compass. We're giving you your north and your south. After a while, if you're following a similar route, do you still need the map? Do you still need the compass? And the answer to that, hopefully, is no. And we're just a tool to help people on their journey. So for me, it's sort of like, first of all, it's finding out what are the foods that is right, sleuthing out trigger foods that could present a problem. Then it's sort of like, we come back to the gamification. How am I doing? I live in the Napa Valley. I do like wine. My wife is actually a certified sommelier by the Guild of Master Soms.
Wow.
And we still enjoy wine as part of our meal. But what wines will kick you out? Because there's no truth in labeling on wines. And so, I've learned that I generally don't do American wines anymore, sadly. I don't do South American wines anymore, sadly. They have wonderful flavors, but what happens is the manufacturers of those wines are pushing the residual sugars to match the American palate. One of the most leading, in the world, critics of wines. He's a type 2 diabetic, and he's had both of his knees replaced, and is morbidly obese. I'm not going to say his name, but this is a person that's choosing wines for America. Well, of course they're choosing wines for America because America is addicted to sugar. But some of these wines, if we go into the older world through the cooler climates, now we can start, because of the wine laws, to pick things out. So we test for wine to work out what we can do. So in that respect, I save my carbs for wine. So this is another area that I utilize it. Then we come back to the why, which I mentioned before. Why is it doing? Is the ketone level for somebody who is epileptic more important? Is it different for somebody who might have a neurological thing like multiple sclerosis? I say possibly. We're working with Dr. Walls. We look forward to seeing her study come on out, and I would like to find out how that happens. More studies need to be done. Does it matter for somebody who's got type 2 diabetes? I would say yes and no. We work with MyMojoHealth in San Francisco. Let's consider this. What does testing ketones do? It means that somebody is in a state of nutritional ketosis. It means that that individual is compliant to what that coach or doctor or nurse practitioner has asked them to do. 28% of people don't take their medications for diabetes, yet Virta had a 74% retention rate. So they did better than somebody taking a pill. Why? Because they're asking them to measure, because you can only manage what you measure. If they're not being successful on that measurement, then the coach can intervene and say, hey, Ben, your blood glucose was up a little bit last night. Did you happen to go out with some friends and maybe step off the reservation? Yeah, I did. Okay, well, let's come back to it. That's the beauty of a coach. And that's the beauty of changing somebody, because you change yourself physiologically, but the hard part is the psychology. Even now when I have a cup of tea, I want to have a packet of cookies that's with it at the same time. And beating that psychology is the hard part. So testing ketones helps with the compliance. But if you're only just doing ketones and not glucose, you're only seeing half the picture. Mm-hmm. Why does Virta Health also test glucose? Well, the most important thing is a ketogenic diet is prescription strength. It works very, very quickly. In fact, in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, they can see changes within 10 days. So it's really, really quickly. And in the importance of safety, you don't want to have somebody who's on medications having a hyperglycemic episode. So you want to be de-prescribing. When do we hear doctors really fixated on de-prescribing? Never.
Not many.
No, never. And that then becomes the beauty. So you can get many different pieces of it. And then after a period of time, as I mentioned, the need to test diminishes and it starts to drop off, because I test, I'm in ketosis, Every time I test now, I'm still in ketosis. So when does the need to do that? Do I still need to test? No, I do it now because of that. So if you and I have done our goals correctly, if we have educated people, they then become successful. They then change the way that their health outcomes for the good. And I should hopefully go out of business if we have great, healthy Americans. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? Yeah, and very few people want to get into this business because of that. It is most people want people to be sick and ill because that means they're going to have money for a long period of time. And that's not what we're about.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate that. And yeah, we don't want to guess, we want to test. And that's where this comes into play. And it's cool that we get to see both glucose and ketones. I love CGMs, for example. I have one now, but it doesn't give me the ketones. And something as simple as getting a Keto Mojo gives me both. And it gets you an idea of where you want to be and where you are. And the next topic here is that with keto being so popular, there are going to be people who are going to research on Dr. Google, how do I test ketones? How do I know if I'm on ketosis? And then the most common thing they're going to do is they're going to see urine strips because they're the cheapest, and they're going to start measuring their urine strips. So why is that flawed, Dorian?
Well, if they go on Google and go to Amazon, they will come across our urine strips. And you go like, what, Dorian? You're the blood guy. You're the beta-hydroxybutyrate. Why have you got urine strips? Well, I got so irritated of people getting ripped off, even though they're cheap, ripped off on urinalysis strips. So we brought our own one out. And if you go inside, once you open the package, we have an entire page explaining to them why this doesn't work.
I didn't even know that. I had no idea.
So if you do the #1 diabetic urinalysis strip in America on Amazon is Keto Mojo urine strips. And inside there is where we give them a coupon to say, hey, we didn't want you to waste your money. Go buy a blood meter.
That's brilliant, man. That's brilliant. I had no idea you were doing that. I love that.
So let's take a look at the 3 different types of tests. Urinalysis is measuring acetoacetate, ACAC, that gets spilled into the urine, and it uses a nitroprusside chemical reaction to say, was there some acetoacetate in that person's urine? And it's sort of like, it gives you a color differential, but the color differential is not granular. It just says some was spilled in the last time you produced this urine. And so maybe for people first starting, it is kind of like a tool that can be used. However, it is not objective. It is sort of like more subjective in that respect. You don't get that clear digital granularity. And also it can be really affected by hydration. People go like, it's really super dark purple, I must be in deep ketosis. No, you're probably actually dehydrated. And then what happens is, as we start to get fat adapted a little bit, or our bodies adjust and change, you're no longer going to have that acetoacetate get spilled. because acetoacetate can be quickly shunted into beta hydroxybutyrate and back again. It's a very unstable compound. It also means that you cannot use it for sleuthing out different foods. It can't really guide you in that respect to give you a biofeedback so that you can adjust your choices. They're very affordable, especially now. They're very affordable that is on that. And, if you're a newbie, give it a go. It's $7. But I would say that is the challenge with urine.
I want to pause this interview real quick and say thank you so much for reaching this point of the interview. If you're getting any value so far, hit the thumbs up button on this video down below and check out the subscribe button here on the channel. If you're not subscribed to the KetoCamp YouTube channel as of yet, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you're notified when we go live, release a brand new video. We do that 2 to 3 times per week. I want to take a few seconds here to get to the sponsor of this episode, which is Upgraded Formulas. If you're anything like me, you probably spend quite an amount of money on supplements every single month. Wouldn't it be great if you knew you were absorbing those supplements or not absorbing those supplements? What I'm bringing you today is an exciting new opportunity to test the accuracy of the supplementation, the vitamins and the minerals, if they're actually doing what they're supposed to do. After all, you can't be a biohacker without testing, can you? In this case, I'm referring to Upgraded Formulas, upgraded hair test kit and consultation. It's very easy to do this test. It's a kit that's sent to you. You would just use hair from your body. It could be head, it could be body, it could be pubic hair. You send in your hair and then you get a consultation and you review which supplements you should be taking versus which supplements you shouldn't be taking. How well are you absorbing that? And this will be a great way to discover why you just don't feel so well. Even if you're taking all these supplements, but you still feel tired, you still have symptoms. This will give you the exact picture on what you should do next to correct that issue. I love Upgraded Formulas. I had Barton Scott on my podcast, the Keto Camp podcast before. We have an exclusive offer for you to get 10% off your hair mineral analysis kit and any of their amazing supplements, which are highly absorbed. Head to upgradedformulas.com. Use the coupon code BEN10, that is BEN10, at checkout to get 10% off today. We will also drop a link down below for you. That's upgradedformulas.com. Use the coupon code BEN10. All right, let's get back to this incredible interview.
Now with breath, there is a gamut of breathalyzers that is out there, from the cheap Chinese breath alcohol ones that have been repurposed to try and get onto the keto train that are just like useless, to ones like the Ketonics or the Biosense, which is like $200-$300, all the way up to the level, which is like $600 and $900. So there's a few things that is the challenge with the breath ones. And this is a fundamental thing, is the sensor that they use is a tin oxide sensor that was originally designed for methane detection. And so to get the acetone in the breath, you have a very, very tiny level of resistancy, and they have to play with a little bit of computer algorithms to kind of like give a rough number. And that rough number, they try and extrapolate into parts per million. And what happens with that is, if you've had lozenges, toothpaste, any of those sugar alcohols, you can get a false positive, and the variability can be quite a lot. And there's no method of control. And what do we mean by method of control? Like, if you ever doubt a measurement from a blood glucose meter like ours, we're one of the few companies in the world that actually put control solutions in your packet. And I'm like, here's the control solution. You can do a control solution test, and if it falls within range, you know your product is working. Not a single breathalyzer does that. Now, they always want to talk about the science of breath. Well, the science of breath, when it was done by a mass spectrometer in parts per million. And not one of those meters has ever correlated itself back to a mass spec. And when you use blood, we, by law, because it's a class 2 medical device, we have to make sure that we correlate back to a bench analyzer, the YSI 2900 Stat Plus. So you know that you will get consistency because of it's a class 2 FDA device. Breathalyzers are class 1s. And the last problem with breathalyzers is after a while, they get a coating on that tin oxide sensor. Because of that coating, they run themselves through a heat cycle to burn it off. But that heat cycle over a period of time coats the sensor, and the sensor can't be removed. You've got no way of control to know that it's doing it. And eventually you end up with a very expensive Goo-Gor in the drawer because it's not giving you the right feedback. And that's why for all clinical trials, all studies, all doctors, clinicians, researchers use blood as the gold standard, because it is a methodology that conforms to an international standards, ISO standards, so that globally that it will conform to consistency. So those are the three methods that comes out.
Yeah, well explained. It's going back to what you did with the urine strip. So I have a question on that. When they buy it, they think that's it right there. But there are actually urine strips in there as well?
Yeah, what you do is you go on in. We have a wonderful coupon in here to say buy a meter and not urine strips, and you're going to get your money back. So even if you do try them, you won't be out of dollars. Okay. You've got 150 that is in the container. But also what we do is we actually have this on your instruction manual here. We have written out and explain all the reasons as to why you don't want to test with
what you just bought.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, it's just what I did. We explained the difference between blood, breath, and urine. I'm not gonna. There is a place for urine for sure for people who are just starting. Even Dominic D'Agostino has used a multi-parameter one in that respect. I mean, no, we're not gonna. That's why we still put urine out. We haven't gone into breath because I don't think breath has merit yet. There's a lot of work that needs to get done for breath, and there's no control methodology to it. So it comes to a poor scientific value. And if we're data driven, we have to be rooted in science in that respect.
So let's talk about the numbers. Somebody bought a Keto Mojo and they're testing now. They're testing to see what their glucose is, what their fasting glucose is, postprandial glucose is, their ketones are. What are some of the optimal ranges we want to aim for? Just general ranges.
So the rabbit hole of like, what am I looking for with my results? Well, first of all, if you're using our meter and you've got our app, it will take the data to the app, and you can always click in on the app and it will take you directly to a page that helps you interpret your results. And remember, we will not give you a diagnosis. We will just say what your results are. It's up to you and what you're trying to achieve. So different doctors and different approaches will want different levels. So I'm kind of like prefacing myself on that. So generally, for nutritional ketosis, according to Volek and Finney, nutritional ketosis starts around about 0.5. So 0.5 to about 1.52 is sort of like that light nutritional ketosis. Over the 1.52s into like the 3s and the 4s, you're in a deeper therapeutic zone. But I'm going to preface, don't go chasing ketones, chase results. That's kind of like, let's be clear on that. We'll park the ketone levels for a moment and we'll come back to them. Okay. Now with blood glucose, generally, I think it's Dr. Bernstein says 83 is what he's going for. The 83andMe crowd that is there as the most perfect blood glucose. Well, you've got to ride that, there's of course, all blood glucose machines have a plus or minus of about 15%. So, there's getting close to the noise is sort of like what you have to be careful of that. So really, if you've got a fasted blood glucose anywhere between sort of like 80 and 100 in the morning, yeah, pretty good. Because I say 100, people won't be worrying about 100, but if your machine that you're using is down by 10 points, you actually might be 90. But that's just the way that blood glucose meters works when you're measuring 1/5 of a drop. Yep. Now, if you're sleuthing out a new food and you see a 30-point plus rise, like say you eat a banana and suddenly you've gone from 90 to 150, yeah, I'd be concerned after about an hour. That might not be a low-carb meal for you. If you're starting to see your fasted glucose in the mornings and about the 130, 140 mark, you've got concern here. You are you're pre-diabetic there. And that's where you kind of like would need to do it. Now, I want to again preface, I've said fasted in the morning, about an hour after waking. Just don't take one anomaly. You want to see a trend before you say, hey, I should need to see somebody. So generally, we like to keep under that 120 mark, 110 mark. There's nice low blood glucose. That's a very nice area to be in. And you don't need to be consuming any kind of carbohydrate to have a blood glucose like that, because through glucose neogenesis, your body will make all the glucose you need. So, that's why the carnivores out there, they don't sweat it. And they're like, okay, that's all right. There are others. So we also have infographics on our website that go through this. We have videos on our website that go through this, and we have articles on our website as well. I don't know if people have gone out to visit ketomojo.com, but we also license all the low carb USA videos. There's over 200 hours of the latest and greatest. I think, Ben, you're also on there from your low carb presentation. And there's a huge plethora of information that we give away for free, along with recipes as well. I have a chef who makes 15 new recipes every month. We've got over 200 recipes that are out there, so people can see how delicious and enjoyable that it is, and along with how to test, when to test, sleuthing out trigger foods to see what does and does not work for you, and also then guides as to how, what should be your ideal.
You said something really important when you were talking about the fasting blood sugars. If your fasting blood sugars are over 130, 140, you got a problem. You got insulin resistance, potentially type 2 diabetes, but you wouldn't know that unless you tested. Yeah, sure, you might not feel good. You might have some fatigue. Maybe you're overweight, but you didn't know you were insulin resistant. You didn't know you had type 2 diabetes, because if you were going to your doctor, they'll look at your A1C, which could take years for that to actually show up to be a problem. But for years prior to that, you have an issue, and it's getting worse each year. But when you have a machine like Keto Mojo, you can actually see that and make a difference and reverse it before it gets to that point. So that was a very important thing.
And let's also talk about guidelines. Would I recommend the ADA guidelines for what they consider to be good blood glucose?
No.
Probably not. If I woke up in the morning and I saw a 120, I'd be like, what's going on, Dorian? But they think 120 is fine.
Yeah.
I'm more like, I want to be between 80 and 100. If I'm there, that's okay. That's the better play. I mean, they think 120 is an okay blood glucose.
Yeah, it's not. Well, they're thinking that because they're referencing all the sick people in America, but that's not what we want to be. We want to be optimal, to your point.
Yeah, I mean, the 4,500 people that got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes today, the $360 billion that goes into that business of people being sick and unwell and have not affected any change in the outcomes since they've started, that we want to manage your diabetes.
Totally.
No, I don't need to manage my diabetes, dude.
Yeah, totally.
I want to go in the other direction.
Exactly. The same diet they promote, do the opposite, and you're going down the right direction. Not to mention the 100,000 plus amputations on diabetics each year in America. It's sickening. And nobody, I shouldn't say nobody. It's very rare somebody actually dies from diabetes. It's what they die from the degeneration of it, the strokes, the heart attacks, the kidney failure. So it leads to that. And it's a cash cow for the medical industry. And then they're taking a hit at the same time. But
let's consider this a moment. It is a cash cow for sure. But
then it's also the opposite.
Yeah. $360 billion is spent a year on type 2 diabetes. Yet Berta Health clinically proved that they can reverse the effects of type 2 diabetes in 55% of the cases. 91% reduction in exogenous insulin. That means they reduced people by over 91%. And I think it was something ridiculous that 67% came off of all medications.
It's amazing.
So when you look at that cost is come down. There was a study that was done about what is the cost of a loss of life. Now, every life is priceless, but they kind of like wanted to put a number to it. I think this might have been Harvard that did this. And they kind of like calculated out that 1 year is about $129,000. When you get a type 2 diabetes diagnosis, you have 10 years less of it in your life. That's 1.2 million for every single individual who we lose to type 2 diabetes. And there's going to be 456 people today at end-stage renal failure. That is over $500 million a day.
It's crazy.
That we are losing, if you kind of like put it on that. And we can change it.
Yeah.
Easily. It's a very easy intervention.
It is. It really is. Something else that I want to talk about. A lot of people ask me, "Hey Ben, does coffee break a fast? Does tea break a fast?" And here's what I tell them. And I actually got this thought process with Dr. Pompa. I tell them to test. What is it doing to your glucose? Like, take your Keto Mojo, test your glucose and ketones, have your coffee. 30 minutes later, test your glucose and ketones. Is it going up by 5 points or more? Then yes. If it goes up, then autophagy is going down. It's breaking your fast. But it's so different for everybody, and you will not know unless you test. Have you done some experiments with that?
Yeah, actually, we quite often will put in a therapeutic fast into our lifestyles. The longest I've gone is 5 days.
Awesome.
In that respect, and the curve is beautiful. I mean, you start fasting, and first of all, you're going to see your blood glucose is going to kind of like drop on off and get into that more stable, lower amount that is there. You're going to see your ketones gradually come on up, your GKI, when you're taking the two of those, kind of like lowers on down. And, as you know, fasting is something that you build up to. You need to get your fasting muscles. You do maybe your 16/8 to begin with, and you kind of like build up to it. And what I always found was, if I got a hunger pang, if you will, and it's a light hunger pang. I think there's some Aboriginals once said there are two types of hunger. There is the great hunger, and then there is the little hunger. And the great hunger is famine. We will never be in a famine. We are blessed that we will never be and experience what the great hunger is. We know at a moment's notice we can walk into our refrigerator, open it up, and we can grab something. We'll never experience the great hunger. But there's the little hunger, and it's dealing with that. And what I always used to do is, when I found myself like that, I would actually do a test to that moment. And normally my ketones used to be about 1.1 to 1.7. But if I'm in a fasted state, I could be 3.5. I've got double the amounts of energy available to me in my body. So am I really hungry? So this is the psychological side that you can start to condition yourself on. Mm-hmm. I said, I don't want to be the keto police. Will somebody have a reaction to coffee? Is there heavy cream in that coffee? Are they having that coffee with half and half or something like that? I don't know. People need to become their own mentors themselves, and using data to guide them to see whether or not a food is right or not right for them. I pretty much want to stay in the middle camp. Whether or not you're a carnivore, whether or not you're a vegan keto, whether or not you're a cyclical keto, whether or not you're an intermittent fasting, but still low carb, that to me doesn't matter. It is the person who's going to be most successful is the one who finds their path, the path that works for them on a daily basis, because it is a lifestyle. It is not a diet. And that's the piece. And that's why we are the compass. We're just going to help you on your way and guide your direction.
I love it. The last thing I want to focus on is, one of my favorite uses of the Keto Mojo is during a block fast. You mentioned you did a 5-day water fast. I also did a 5-day water fast. And the goal when I do it, or if I take somebody through a block fast, of course, we train for it. We build up the fasting muscle, like you said. But the primary goal that I'm looking for myself and for that person is this maximum autophagy state that Dr. Thomas Seyfried.
Yeah. When would you say that starts for most people? Are you saying it's within the first 24, 48 hours? Or are you more of a proponent for the 36 hours? I'd be very intrigued as to where you think max autophagy begins and how you like to use a Keto Mojo for that. I'd love to hear that.
So for me, it's when we take the blood glucose from the Keto Mojo, divide it by 18, and then compare it to the ketones for the 1-to-1 ratio.
So you're utilizing the GKI then?
The GKI, yeah. So I used, before I even, you had the GKI, I didn't have a word for it. So I use the GKI, which is what you have very easy to use. So, and that's where, and you could talk more about it, where Dr. Thomas Seyfried has literally seen tumors shrink when they hit that ratio. So speak more about that and how we could use your machine to accomplish that.
Yeah, well, if you do a test within 4 minutes of each other, glucose and ketone test, and you download it to our app, which is free, it'll calculate the GKI for you, so you don't have to even do the divided by.
Yeah, I'm just old school. I kept doing it. I got used to it. Yeah.
And actually, what's interesting is our meter in Europe is called the GKI in Europe, and we can actually you put it into GKI mode. You measure glucose, measure ketones, and it'll calculate the GKI for you on the meter there and then.
That's pretty cool.
Sadly, Uncle Sam, FDA, that's too new for them. They wouldn't let us do it, and they said no to us having the GKI, and that's why it's called the GK Plus in America, because the federal government put a line through us on that one. So it's a little joke to Uncle Sam on that. But Professor Seyfried, I mean, from the work that he was doing in cancer, was he realized that there was a distinct relationship between glucose and ketones. And if you look at Otto Warburg was the first person that posited that cancer feeds on glucose. Some kind of cancers can. Some cancer's a tricky little subject, and it can morph. And so, they were looking at that, and what he found that there's a lot of noise in glucose measurements, and there can be noise in ketone measurements as well. But if he did a fasted measurement in the morning, and then, as you said, divided your glucose measurement in millimoles via your ketone measurement millimoles, you start getting a much stable number. And it is a scale done 1 to 9. So roughly 6 to 9 is light nutritional ketosis. 3 to 6 is sort of like we're getting into deep ketosis. 1 to sort of like 3 is a high therapeutic zone. But under 1 is really, really hard to get to. I mean, really hard to get to. You've got to be in severe caloric restriction for that one. Definitely fasted when you're doing it. You've got to be pulsing in on this bit. And they might even be. This is something that I would definitely say recommend. This is the doctor world for you, and be careful on how you utilize that. But it's interesting that you're utilizing the GKI as a proxy for autophagy. But your GKI will really fluctuate based upon your glucose level. Like glucose. You can be in the GKI, if you've got even a 0.4 or 0.5 on your ketones, which according to Volek and Finney, that would say, yes, you're in nutritional ketosis. If your glucose is too high at that time, that will not be nutritional GKI at that time. So,
and that's because the glucose is such a toxic fuel source. The body wants to use that and get rid of it first before it does use the ketones, correct?
Precisely. Yeah. Now, out of this work that Seyfried done, came the papers by Dominic D'Agostino and Miriam Kanin, Seyfried, and I think it's Mukherjee et al. They came with the press pulse therapy.
Yes.
Which I think is going to be probably one of the game changers, and I'm hoping at HBOT coming up next week in Florida that we might hear more about what the work is being done between hyperbaric oxygen, because that's adding oxygen into the body rather than because cancer feeds in an anaerobic environment on glucose. They were pressing and pulsing it in using glutamine inhibitors, because this is interesting when people think about this. Glucose, you need a transport ship to take it across the blood-brain barrier. Ketones can come across the blood-brain barrier, doesn't need any help. So what do you think our default source should be?
The one that doesn't need help.
Do you think that evolution said, oh, you've got to have a ship to help you out come across here? Or you can just have ketones that can walk across water and go into your brain. I would like to posit that ketones is actually humans' default fuel source.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And glucose was not. Because if you think about it, through glucose neogenesis, we have this small little spigot that is adding tiny amounts of glucose to our body every day. So slowly our glycogen stores over a period of time can grow so we can do the sprints that we need to do to get the elk that we need. But generally, our default is ketones. This is the natural state. Is cyclical good or bad? I mean, I don't honestly know that. I mean, there are advocates for and against that. We know that berries are very rare in nature. There's going to be a short window where we might have got to them. We would have to fight off the bears and the squirrels and the raccoons and everybody else trying to get them, but there's a short window. If we actually take a look in nature, carbohydrates are very, very rare indeed.
Yeah.
And if you've got a choice of picking out tiny little seeds in a prairie or taking down an elk, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. And I think for 2.5 million years, this was how we evolved as a species to have such great brains to be as to what we are. And so when you look at the proper human diet, what is optimal? Mm-hmm. Because the foods that we are eating now are not the foods that we had for the millennia before that.
Yeah. Burning fat is our primal birthright. If you look at babies that are breastfed, they go in and out of ketosis because breast milk has saturated fat and cholesterol. Yep. And it helps the development of the baby's brain. Even though there is some glucose and sugar in the breast milk, they're so efficient, the baby is at burning it down, they tap into ketosis right off the bat. It's like we're designed this way. Yeah,
well, they're naturally fat adapted. I mean, the amount of carbs that I can actually have, I don't count carbs anymore. I don't sweat carbs anymore. If there's a carrot in my beef bourguignon, I'm not going to oh my God, it's a carrot. That's not keto. Keto police, who's going to get arrested? You don't look at that. But what I do is I know I have this metabolic flexibility.
Yeah.
And that becomes the game is once you have that metabolic flexibility.
Agreed.
And so, it's easier in that respect.
Yeah, that's what it's about. Metabolic flexibility. That's what I teach in Keto Flex, to not be dogmatic about it and use it as the proper tool that it is. But it's not the only tool. We have a lot of tools available to us. And having a Keto Mojo is a great way to see if your tool is working for you. It's a tool for your tool, which is the ketogenic lifestyle.
Yeah, there's two things you mentioned right there that is spot on. We are just one data point in the terrain of the individual. And, a lot of people want to dial in on one data point, but we've got to add into that. There is the sleep. There are the toxins that are in your environment. Mm-hmm. There is getting the right amount of exercise that is coming on into play. There's a lot more things that can come into the terrain of an individual that you need to adjust. And this is where coaching and education become absolutely key. People want to have the magic pill. Well, it's not like that. There's a lot of different things that have to come into play to get optimized. And I think that's an important piece that you're bringing in when you look at it. It's just one of the tools that you can use in your pantheon.
That's correct. So for the keto campers listening or watching on YouTube, we have the device ready for you to get right now. If you want to get a Keto Mojo device and see exactly what we're talking about, measure your glucose, measure your ketones, see where you're at, see if you're improving, see if you're not improving, then go to ketocampmachine.com. Camp is spelled with a K. Ketocampmachine.com. We also are going to work out a coupon code for you all, which is going to be KetoCamp at checkout. And you could check the notes of this podcast or the YouTube video. We'll drop that down below for you. So, Dorian, where else can they go check you out? And where else do you want to share with them as your closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts is this week we quietly released what is, I say quietly because it's something we've been working on for about a year, is MyMojoHealth. This, I think, is the most fundamental game changer that we've had in the last 2 years. And if you click on the top of MyMojoHealth, it explains all about it. But we have built a secure, HIPAA-compliant, encrypted health cloud using OAuth authentication and REST APIs. And what all that mumbo jumbo tech jargon means is the data can come from your phone to the cloud. And now we've started to interconnect with some of the best health apps that are in the market, Apple Health Kit, Chronometer, Carb Managers coming soon, new NutriSense, Biocanic, Heads Up Health. So those great health apps. But more importantly, we have also now interconnecting with the leading EHR, electronic health record, and EMR systems in America, and will soon go to other countries as well, like Epic, Elation, Athena, and Serbo and those kind of things, so that you, if you want, can connect your data to your doctor or your coach or your practitioner. Now, if your doctor's using a completely different system and that we don't yet connect to them, let us know. We'll find a way of connecting to them. But we've also built in the MyMojoHealth dashboard a way that a consumer can either just see their stuff on their desktop, or a practitioner like you can come to me and say, hey, Dorian, I'd like to connect on in and I want to see everybody that I'm coaching and working with. And we'll go like, sure, Ben, no problem. Here's the set of keys. We'll do an authentication between ourselves. And now you can go on in and you can see on a daily basis, everybody who might have tested that morning. And you're going to go, you know what? I want to search by all the people who might have, for safety, might be super low blood glucose because they might be getting hyperglycemic, and I might have to, for the doctor, they might have to deprescribe, or those who are getting too high on their blood glucose, who are, hey, you know, what's going on here? We need to adjust or work with you. And then there are others who say like, who is or is not in nutritional ketosis, so that you can target your responses in, not waiting until the patient client comes to you, but seeing it in real time. And, you know, we're working with different universities as well for clinical trials so they can get this data. So MyMojoHealth, it's now on in servers in Europe as well as servers in America. It's available at this moment. MyMojo. Now the interface is what I call an MVP. Like what you're seeing on the screen, it was like, let's get the data out first. And then we're going to look forward to getting feedback from everybody. And over the next 5 months, you know, I have a $400,000 budget that we're going to build the best-in-class interface for not only practitioners and users, so that they can be like, I got this, I got it dialed on in. So anybody who's bought their meter in the past, your meter just got better.
Oh, that's so cool. MyMojoHealth, and go check that out. We'll drop a link for that down below as well. Dorian, thank you, and thank Gemma, and thank you for the entire team for the cool product that you developed that making ketones more affordable and getting the science to back it up, and to also give us a tool to help us see if this lifestyle is working for us or not. I love you guys over at Keto Mojo. I use your product. I've been using it for over 3 years now, and I look forward to seeing you at the conference next week and several conferences in the future. And thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Ben. It's appreciated.